Hey, Dustin, Phil Susan here. How are you?
I'm excellent. How you doing today?
All right, I'm calling in a couple of minutes early. I hope that's okay. I just figured I'd be earlier rather than later.
No, that's excellent. I really appreciate you taking the time with me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Can you tell us a bit about what you've been up to as of late? I know you've had a single or two out recently. Is there anything else maybe you're working on?
Yeah, we've been working, we've been obviously trying to continue working with Last in Line as much as we can in terms of preparing what's going on. We are actually, well, off the record, I mean, we've had some label changes that we're going through, which we're almost, I think, fairly complete with at this point. And we also have started recording a third record. So purely by chance, last January, end of January, might even been beginning of February, we went into a studio that we work at a lot I work at a lot in LA, and just for fun, just said, let's cut a track or two, let's just jam and see what happens. And we ended up recording 6 or 7 backing tracks that came together very quickly. That turned out to be a godsend because during this time that we've been locked down, we've been able to finish those. So we've got about half the record done, and what remains to be done is, I don't know, another 6 tracks or something. In the meantime, I've been quite active in trying to keep some momentum going. I talked to the guys, and we started doing this Sickness show, which turned out to be pretty cool, just to keep people, engaged. And then we created a video for a song that we had never released before. It was released in Japan, but we were able to do a video for worldwide release. So we did that. And in the meantime, I'm just trying to also keep on some of my solo stuff for, I've had plenty of time. So yeah, I decided to release a couple of singles. I was wanting to do an album, but then the case for creating an album is, as one single product is starting to become less and less relevant, I think.
Sure.
It makes more sense to release the songs one at a time, put some effort behind them, and eventually, maybe create an album as a final sort of aggregated product.
Yeah, that's great.
That's what I've been doing, and I've got an autobiography which is finished, and I'm just going through rereads and figuring out whether I want to self-publish it or whether I want to go through a publisher. So I'm getting into that stage of the thought process.
Wow, so you've definitely been taking advantage of the downtime here, it sounds like.
Yeah, it doesn't include any personal stuff either. What have you been doing?
Well, just trying to stay sane, I think, like a lot of people. But it's definitely cool that you're working on the new Last in Line album. We had Vivian Campbell on a few years ago, and it seems like that band kind of started out as, let's just see how this works out. And now you're on your third album. That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody really knew how that was supposed to work out or how it was going to go. We originally, I think after Jimmy Bain passed away, I was asked if I would do some shows. The original idea was to just go out there and fulfill the live commitments that we had in terms of a handful of shows, festival and a few independent shows. And that was really the long and short of it. For me, it was a sort of bittersweet thing. I mean, I was excited to be playing with the guys, and who I know quite well. And at the same time, I was excited to sort of pay a little tribute to my friend Jimmy, and to be able to play some of these songs that he'd worked very hard on for the people that he never managed to play, whom he never managed to play them. So, there was something very gratifying about that. I felt like I was up there channeling Jimmy, and being able to sort of complete that stage of the process for him. And I felt very honored as well to do that, to be asked to do it. So when we did that, it started to transpire that the band definitely had a great chemistry and started to sort of grow legs, for want of a better word. And discussions after that, we started thinking, well, maybe this is something we should keep going with. So we went in to do the second record, and that would probably have been the deciding point. When we went to the studio, I'm sure there was a lot of apprehension about how the chemistry was going to work when it came down to writing new material. That's always an unknown quantity.
Sure.
And so, yeah, I was nervous about it. I'm quite happy to be honest about that. I knew that everything rested on it, and so for that reason, I was nervous. And I felt like, yeah, I hope this can work out because it'll be great. And if it doesn't work out, well, then that probably answers a lot of questions, and we'll see what happens. The other guys, of course, had already written one album, so I was the new guy. I was the odd man out, or I was the unknown quantity. And we got in there, and just straight away we started banging ideas down. It was fantastic, and very, very soon it was evident that we had it made sense for us to want to keep this going.
Sure. Well, does that add extra pressure for you? Not just because Jimmy was your friend, but the Dio fans out there, kind of from where this came from, very passionate, of course. So, do you feel pressure when you find yourself in a situation like that?
No, I really don't. And I think the reason is because, as far as Dio goes, that work has been done. It's been released. It's been established. It will never be replaced. No one will ever do it the same way again. It's legendary stuff. It's fantastic stuff. Sadly, Ronnie's not here anymore. And so it's not like we can create another Dio album. What we are trying to do is to create an album that pays homage to that Dio period and that has the same DNA built into it. But it's going to be different, and it's going to be unique. But it really does have the roots of that. It's like, for want of a better word, you go and see Jason Bonham. Jason Bonham's father was John Bonham. I mean, he's not John Bonham, but yet that he's from the same DNA. He's cut from the same cloth, and there is a slightly different angle. We're all different musicians. Now, we'll go out there and play the stuff, and I think a lot of people would agree with what I said, that you can definitely tell the roots and the origins of where our influences come from. But then, you'll get somebody who's a big fan and who might not, see it that way and might take it as, well, I don't think that this is, they'll try to compare, apples to oranges. And to that person, I say, no, you're absolutely right. We're not Dio. And unfortunately, as much as I would love to play with Ronnie, he's not here. We can't do it.
Sure.
And there's a band out there that will play the Dio songs, and do a fine job of it, and the Dio Disciples, and that's their model. What we're trying to do is we're trying to do something that's new. We want to take it into a different direction. So we have a lot of original material, and we have it's really cool. Actually, a couple of times we've gone out there and we did Download Festival a year and a half ago, way back when bands used to play live shows, which I can sort of barely remember. I think I remember what it was like.
Yeah.
But we did that festival. It was one of the biggest shows we did. We got invited onto a 100,000 people festival, and backstage we toyed with an idea and said, let's do something really crazy here. Let's play just our own material for this set. And we're either going to fall flat on our faces or people are going to love it. But regardless, it's going to give us some answers. And we went out there, and that's what we did, and people loved it. So that gave us a tremendous amount of confidence that we were doing, I think, the right thing.
Awesome. Well, I know this isn't the first time you've been in a situation like that. When you joined up with Ozzy's band, you were replacing Bob Daisley. I mean, but you obviously have the chops for these situations. Can you talk a bit about what that experience was like? I know you were, relatively unknown at the time, and then you're right in the midst of, a national audience.
There was definitely a jet propulsion from one level to another. There's no doubt about it. I came from London, which was a very small and very tight music community where everybody knew everybody. We all knew each other. To that extent, you couldn't really bullshit anybody over there because everybody knew everybody and they knew what was what. So I was quite well known around that circle as somebody who was up and coming. I'd been playing with Simon Kirke. I'd been playing with Jimmy Page. I'd done little stints here and there with other bands. I mean, I'd even spent a couple of weeks working with Peter Frampton before he had a situation that suffered a hiccup and had to be postponed. So people knew me in London, But to get to the point where all of a sudden I was, playing in an international band and in a band in the United States that was so well known, this was all new. It was all new for me, and it was all new to everybody else who came to see the band. I was the new guy, yeah, no doubt about it. And it really is that, what's that saying when you get dragged by the scruff of your neck? I mean, everything happens so fast and so quickly, it doesn't even have a moment to settle in. You're just kind of, charging along. It's like a high-speed train. And it's not until you stop somewhere and take a breather and look back that you realize all the things that you've done. And I was very fortunate, and I was very blessed to be able to have that opportunity. It's so much of what we do is, and it's not just ability, it's not just talent. There's so many other things. I mean, you can have great talent, but you have to have the chemistry as well, and you have to have the right attitude, and you have to have the right work ethic, and all of these things are what you're judged on when you get a gig like that. It's not just, oh, can he play the notes? When we were looking for a guitar player after Jake had gone, we had hundreds of guitar players, nearly 400 guitar players, and all of them could play the notes. So there's always something more, and you're going to be part of a team, you're going to be part of a group, and you're going to be in each other's pockets, 24/7 for the next foreseeable amount of time. So there are a lot of things that have to come together, and I was very aware of those, and as it happened, it worked out really well. So that was it was terrific.
Yeah, and it's been 35 years now since The Ultimate Sin was released.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah, I know.
You just made me feel really old.
Well, that album was, such a big deal when it came out. Still 35 years later, still a favorite for a lot of people, me included.
Thank you very much. I can't believe it's been that long, and maybe because I was so young when I joined the band. I was, 23, 24. And so I still consider myself 23, 24 when I see that album. And maybe that's why I'm having a hard time sort of realizing that duration of time. But it's strange. It's strange, Dustin, because I got I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago or so, 15 years, maybe just over 10 years ago, I started getting tons of mail from people saying, hey, I just discovered that album. Like younger people, 3 to 4 years is a generation in our business. So you go through 10 years, that's 3 generations, and now all of a sudden you've got young kids coming up to me and they're saying, I found this fantastic band, they're called Journey. Have you ever heard of them? And I'd say, yeah, I think so. And Journey had kind of, they had some success on that TV show, and a secondary success that opens the door to new people and to young kids. And so these young kids are calling me up and asking me about bands that I, of course, know very well. And one of the things they found was the Ultimate Sin album. And then I went down, sat down, and, I hadn't listened to this thing for over a decade. And I literally put it on and listened very carefully to it from start to finish. And I remember thinking, wow, this is a really good album. I knew it was good, but I didn't realize how good it was. And I also was appreciative of the people who called in and said, this is a great album. I love the record. I love the production or the songs or whatever it is. So that was nice. But it has been a long time. It's been 35 years.
Well, of course, as a bass player, your relationship with a drummer is extremely important. I wanted to ask you, what it was like for you playing with Randy Castillo. You guys seem to really have a connection.
Yeah, Randy was he was my lifelong closest friend, probably. And we got to know each other before we were playing with Ozzy. He was playing with Lita Ford, and I was hanging out with Lita when she lived in London, and that's how I knew her as his drummer, as her drummer. And but immediately we hit it off. The two of us hit it off. We stayed in touch, and we stayed in touch for a long time. And one day I heard he was flying in to audition for Ozzy, and because I heard about it, I drove down to I think he came into Gatwick Airport in the south of London. And I flew down there to meet him, surprise him, and he got off the plane. He said, "What the fuck are you doing here?" I said, "Actually, I was going to ask you the same thing, but I'm here anyway." And he was on a layover. He was going to fly over up to Scotland. So we spent some time together. make a long story short, 3, 4 weeks later, maybe even a little bit longer than that, almost 2 months later, I found myself in the band. And the two of us, it was just fantastic. It was just great doing that tour with, as best friends. Sharon used to call us the Righteous Brothers. I mean, we were like inseparable, So we did everything together, and we were pretty much the life of the party, I would say. We'd always be, there's always be some nonsense going on around us, and I write extensively about that in my book. But his loss was really bad, and you think about it, it's about 20 years ago now, right?
Yeah.
And I can't believe that either. But we remained very, very close, very good friends. Not a day that goes past where he doesn't pop into my mind with one of his, silly comments or one of his mannerisms, and indeed his talent. I mean, what a great drummer. I mean, he was the kind of drummer that, I've got to say, I'm very lucky. I've played with some of the greatest drummers in the world. I've had the opportunity to do so, whether it was Simon Kirke or whether it was Simon Phillips when I worked with Lucas, or whether it was Randy, or whether it was a plethora of drummers, Mike Baird with Billy Idol, and so many great drummers, and drummers who I worked with John Waite when I played with John. He had some fantastic drummers as well, and of course Vinny. I mean, how can you Vinny is just such a monster of a drummer. But Randy was one of those drummers too. Had his own spirit, a completely unique sound and a style, and it was very earthy, and it was very. I mean, he pulled in on his Indian influences and how he looked at the drums, and the drums were some kind of strange connection he had with his past, and he would do things in a very unconventional way. And when he did, it was unique, and I think that's what contributed to his own style. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool, and he got mad when I left the band as well. I think he and I had some words about that, and but in a good way. I mean, he wanted his buddy to stay in the band, and to be honest, I wanted to carry on working with him. So we were both coming from the same disappointment almost, but we stayed friends through that. And one of the things that he said to me on his deathbed, for want of a better word, is he said to me, he said, I was really mad when you left the band, but I kind of wish I'd done the same thing, because you went on and played with all of these great, very diverse situations, and I felt that maybe you had more of a diverse journey. And he said, I just want you to know that I think about that a lot, and it made me compile one of my life rules, which is that it's always better to regret the things you did than to regret the things you didn't do. And if things are not 100% right, that people should never be afraid to make a left turn and don't look back, just do something else. And we sacrifice so much in this business, friends, family, in my case, country, everything, that if something's not right, then, and it's not exactly what you want, or it's nothing bad, nothing detrimental, nothing derogatory to anybody. If it's just not, making you feel that this is the right thing to be doing and that you might be better off doing something else, and do it. Make a left turn, do it. So, sorry to get a little philosophical on you there, but that's kind of how I see these things.
Well, it's great that, that time period at least was captured, on the album. And of course, the video that came out, I watched that a lot too. What is your relationship like with Ozzy these days? I mean, I know there was some weirdness there. Has time kind of helped fix, the weird issues that you guys had?
You know what? Let me clear this up once and for all. There wasn't that much weirdness that was going on. I think what happened was I was in a position where as I was describing, I was not able to cut the deal that I wanted. I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to cut a certain type of deal. And kudos to Sharon. Listen, she basically presented this to us in a very simple way. We were there, and we were being hired to do our best work, the best work that we could possibly do to make Ozzy sound and look as good as he possibly could. And we also knew that if we were not okay with that situation, that there's probably 36 people waiting in the wings that would gladly, come along and do what we were doing. So it got to a point where I think that I I felt that I wanted to. I was being expected to write more songs, and I wanted to kind of boost up my publishing and what have you. And for whatever reason, I was not able to cut a deal that was acceptable with Sharon, and I couldn't really get the same deal that I wanted. And so, at a moment, I just said, well, then it's time for me to move on. And it's a difficult decision. You leave the biggest band in the country. But I said, oh, you know what? I've done it all once. I did one round, one tour, one this, one that, and let me move on and see what happens. And I left. And I think she might have been a little upset about that, about the fact that I left. But for whatever reason, we had some accounting issues. So all of a sudden I was having a hard time getting paid. And my accountants went, back and forth a few times. And all of this got resolved eventually. It was just a payment thing. It was like, late payments and stuff. And I don't know the motivation was or whatever it was, or if there was even a motivation. Maybe it was just out of sight, out of mind. But, once I wasn't in the band, people weren't jumping to take my call about things like that. So it got resolved, and it got resolved in probably 1992 or 1993. And ever since then, everything's just been fine. So, there's been some really weird stories that I've read. I was suing them, and I was asked to join the lawsuit that Bob Daisley had, but I never joined that lawsuit. I didn't have anything to sue anybody about. I think Bob and Lee had some issues that were going on, and
sure.
But when they called me, I just said the same thing I just said to you. I said, well, what do why would I want to do this? So that was it. But all of a sudden you hear these stories that we were in courts, and we never went to court, and I never sued anybody. So
okay, yeah, that's like you said, you hear a lot of different stories, but it's good to finally get that straightened out. And obviously things worked out for you, and you went on, as you mentioned, to play with so many different types of people. And Billy Idol, for one, I wanted to ask you your appearance in The Adventures of Ford Fairlane. I remember seeing a lot of people in that movie, and then you popped up in there as well. That's a favorite of a lot of folks around here.
That was I was very close with Vince for years, and even during the Ozzy times, every time I run into Ozzy, he's totally sweet. He's great. He's a legend, and he's very funny. And I would run into him with Randy all the time afterwards, and there was never anything weird. He was always the same old guy. But I'd been friendly with other people, and with Vince during that time, we would always organize jams around town, around Los Angeles, when I moved there. So he called me up one day and said, "Hey, I got to put a band together for this. I've been asked to do this Ford Fairlane thing. You want to do it with me?" And I said, "Sure." So he said, "Who should we get?" And of course I said, "Well, let's get Randy, but I don't know who you want to get guitar." And he said, "Well, he was close friends with Carlos." And he said, "Let's get Carlos." I said, "Great." So that's how we did that. And we did that. And ironically, Rock the Cradle of Love was the song from that movie, right?
Yep.
How funny was that? I mean, that had nothing to do with us. It just was out there in the coincidence world. But again, one of the reasons that I left Ozzy was that I had been talking with Billy. At that time, he told me he was fed up with his current band, and he wanted to start something new. And initially, he'd sort of said it would be something like a complete band, a bit like Generation X or something. And I was very interested in doing that. I had some personal desires to want to play with Billy that stems back to where I came from, where I was born. I was born in a place in London called Maida Vale, which is in Paddington. And in the 1974, 1975, and that's where punk music started, was in that little area. And I was 14 years old or 13 years old or whatever I was. And that was a very influencing part of my music. I was a rock fan, but I couldn't ignore what was going on with punk music. And I felt like a closet punk guy. And immediately when I started playing, guys were trying to get me into punk bands. And there was a guy who played drums with Generation X called John Tao. And John loved the way I played. He said, "I got to get into some of these bands." He went on to play with Adam Ant and UK Subs and what have you. And every time I'd walk in there, I felt like I was about 4 years too young. Everyone was about 4 years older than me. And then I felt that I probably had missed that boat. By 1976, punk was finished in England. That was it. It ran its course. Didn't really start in America until after that, but in England it was done. And so now you would understand why the opportunity to play with Billy resonated with me. And I said, yes, this is a bucket list thing. I want to do this. I've been wanting to do this for years. And that contributed as well to my decision to leave Ozzy. I said, let's just do something different, something totally different, and something I really want to do. And no detriment to Ozzy or Sharon or anyone else. And it was just one of those decisions.
Awesome. Well, it's definitely just a chunk of all the stuff you've done over your career, Phil. And I know you mentioned obviously the new Last in Line album and the book you're working on. Is there anything else maybe coming up we should watch out for?
I think I'm going to continue releasing some singles. I'm trying to. I'm working on another 2 right now, and like I said, I just want to make sure that I put little videos with them as well, so that there's some cool stuff that people can kind of get a visual with the song as well. I might have some guest appearances here and there. The Please Don't Make Me Wait song had Richie Kotzen playing guitar. Richie and I are very close friends, and actually, it was him who gave me the idea to release everything as a song-by-song basis. He said he was doing the same thing with some of his stuff. So that's really it. That's what I'm up to. I can't wait to get out and play again. We had a show in Vegas that I used to work on, and the show ended a while ago. So I'm working with some of the participants on that show to create a new Las Vegas show called Long Live Rock. And it's going to be a revolving door, and it's going to be a review of great classic songs from the last decade or two. And each time we get another celebrity in, we'll probably add a couple of their songs. So it'll be a constantly changing set list. But it'll be a great Vegas show, and we want to do that in our sort of downtime, maybe, who knows, 3 times a week or something. I think it'd be great for people to come to Vegas and they want to see something really special. And we have a lot of big names that want to be participants in that. So it's going to be a lot of big current names of well-known bands. So that's another project. All of this depends on us being allowed to get into a room and make noise.
Excellent. Phil, again, thank you so much for your time. I'm a huge fan of yours, and it's been an honor speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Well, I wish you all the best, Dustin. I hope everything's okay and works out. But as I said, please stay in touch with me and let me know anything else I can do for you. All
right. Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it.
You take care.
And again, that was musician Phil Soussan on the 35th anniversary of the release of Ozzy Osbourne's The Ultimate Sin album. And Phil will be with the band Last in Line. They've got a new album coming up this year as well.